The glass sings when the grav tram skims past, a thin, nervous note that Mara says she can feel in her teeth as she presses her palm to the exhibit wall. "We're not a prison," she whispers, though the ceiling's auroras flicker like warning lights and Jonas smirks because euphemisms are a keeper's first tool. Beyond the glass, the concourse blooms with color. Mantled giants with bead-bright eyes, vaporous scholars drifting in harnesses, a child of some antlered species hoisted to see the dangerous ones wave. Mara keeps her voice low as the docent drone hums by, translating, "Apex primate, social omnivore, unpredictable, unpredictable," she repeats, and the word tastes like a dare as Amaya squeezes her hand and asks if the sky can open. Keeper Threx appears, carapace, polished, posture apologetic, and says the protocols are for everyone's safety, theirs as well as ours, and Mara almost laughs, because the only teeth on display are human. The glass sings again. Somewhere, thunder rolls, though there's no weather here, just climate control, and a script that pretends the zoo isn't afraid of what it caught. Morning drifts in with a programmatic bird song that never lands, a loop tuned to be pleasant and forgettable. Jonas jokes it sounds like an advertisement for a meadow while he flips the pan, and Amaya laughs because the yoke holds. Mara watches the ceiling brighten toward false noon, counting the seconds between the spectral shifts, mapping the loop to the beat of the tram outside. She tells Mr. Cole that the service hatch isn't sealed like a prison door, more like something expected never to be touched, and he replies that expectation is the finest lock ever made. When the docent drone chimes at the boundary to announce visiting hours, they pause. An old choreography of exhibit and audience, the way one learns to be still as glass. Mara smooths her jacket as if it were a uniform from a former ship, then says she'll try the hatch during the scheduled aquatic enrichment, code for distracting waves in the courtyard pond. Jonas warns her that Threx notices the small things, the way a gaze lingers, the way silence grows teeth. Amaya asks if the sky can open yet. Only if we pry it. Mara answers, smiling like a contingency plan. They are called to the amphitheater for cognitive enrichment, which is both a test and a spectacle. The tier's already blooming with iridescent mantles and flickering eyes. The hollow projects a maze of symbols, a logic toy dressed as Mercy. And Mara starts to speak before the drone can, explaining to Amaya how language hides in patterns, how escape sometimes begins with finding the exit in someone else's story. Jonas plays along, muttering wrong guesses to lull the watchers, letting them mark him as the unreliable variable, while Mara threads the right path with finger taps that look like fidgets. Threx lingers at the rail, his posture a polite neutrality that reads, to human eyes, like a guard practiced in kindness. Mr. Cole coughs into his sleeve, the sound echoing like a gavel, and a hush settles as the puzzle blooms open into a soft chime. The crowd warbles approval. Mara bows as if it were a stage, feeling the map of the zoo redraw in her head. Corridors like veins, doors like eyelids, alarms like breath. In the pause afterward, she hears water begin to churn in the courtyard pond. Behind the amphitheater, the corridor hums with the low animal sound of machines at rest, and Threx intercepts them with the diffident grace of a docent who has practiced being unthreatening. He thanks them for the demonstration, voice filtered through a translator that adds a sympathetic burr and mentions almost casually that certain service panels have been flagged for recalibration. Mara replies that recalibration is a lovely word for fear. He flinches, barely, and says there are protocols older than any keeper, that danger is a category inherited like a shrine. Jonas steps closer, the soft weight of muscle turning into a statement, and Threx keeps his palms open as if holding a bowl of light. Mr. Cole asks whether their plaque will ever be updated. Threx says plaques are revised only after incidents. You mean escapes, Mara says. and her smile is not a smile. The translator pauses, searching for a softer synonym, and fails. In the distance, the pond pumps thrum higher, the sound of opportunity pretending to be decor. Threx lowers his gaze, the sash's iridescence dulling in the corridor's cobalt glow, and whispers that the glass is strongest where it looks most forgiving. Night cycle returns like a curtain. The ceiling dims to indigo, the air cools, and the glass resumes its thin singing as the tram glides past, on a schedule they now know by heart. The courtyard pond has been riled for hours, a carefully staged storm meant to soothe or distract, and Mara counts the seconds between its churns. On the 17th, Jonas lifts the vent cover with the slow reverence of a locksmith in a temple. Amaya holds the flashlight, beam tucked low to keep from kissing the glass, her breath measured like she's matching an unseen metronome. Mr. Cole waits by the kitchen door, a silhouette that could be worry or faith. The hatch's gasket peels with a sound like old fruit rind, and the corridor beyond exhales cold metal. "If we're a dangerous species," Jonas murmurs. "Maybe it's because we keep walking." Mara slides in first, shoulders grazing chilled conduit, counting handholds, tasting dust that isn't dust but filtered history. The alarm does not howl. Only a small amber diode wakes, the kind of warning that trusts no one will notice. Above them, the auroras flicker, practiced northern lights for an audience that has already gone home. The service shaft narrows to a throat lit by spaced amber nodes, each one pulsing like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to them. And Mara keeps her right hand on the conduit because the metal telegraphs the station's moods better than any map. Jonas crawls behind, vent cover, strapped across his back like a shield, whispering that the air smells ionized, and that means a pressure change ahead. She answers that pressure is only a conversation between inside and out. And conversations can be persuaded. Amaya moves with a child's fearless economy, counting rungs under her breath and flashing the light only when Mara taps twice. Mr. Cole brings up the rear, murmuring shipyard stories to quiet his breath. His voice turns the shaft into a place with history instead of threat. When the amber node ahead brightens, a maintenance beetle clicks out on spindly legs, optical bead swiveling toward them. "Hello," Amaya whispers, and the beetle hesitates, long enough for Mara to palm a panel and spoof a routine clean cycle. Doors blink receptive. We're just dirt. Mara tells the shaft softly, passing through. They emerge into a junction the size of a chapel, ducts arching like ribs and a fan. The diameter of a tram idling behind a safety grate. Mara traces the schematic etched into the wall paint. Arrows, codes, a half-harassed legend, and translates aloud for the others as if reading a spell. Jonas points out the patrol routes. Dead zone, and says they've got 90 seconds if the keepers run this place like a ship. Mr. Cole answers that institutions run like temples, not ships, and temples love ritual. The hum deepens. A secondary light ignites with a soft question. Threx steps from a shadowed maintenance bay. Sash gone, harness buckled. His posture careful the way one approaches injured animals and old gods. He doesn't raise his hands this time. He lowers his eyes. The glass is strong where it forgives, Mara says quietly, and he nods as if completing her thought. The translator lags, then admits to a word it cannot soften. Escape. Threx taps a pad. Far away. A tram sighs into a longer loop. "You have 1 cycle's quiet," he says. "Make its silence heavy." Amaya thanks him as if for a borrowed lantern. The junction exhales them into a maintenance spine that runs along the zoo's skin, a vertebrate corridor with spar windows cut like coins into the black. Stars pour through in cold abundance, indifferent as math, and for a second everyone forgets the glass and remembers gravity as a choice. Mara checks the pressure seals and whispers that space is honest because it kills without theater. Jonas replies that honesty is overrated when you need a lie to live. Amaya presses her nose to a window and describes Earth to Threx, who lingers a step behind, as if she could paint home with words. Oceans like folded foil, cities like ember constellations, clouds thick as milk. Mr. Cole rests a palm on the wall to feel the gyro's precess. He smiles at the old language of spin. A siren yawns somewhere distant, the soft rehearsal kind. And Mara picks the latch on a relay alcove, marked with a glyph for non-sapient access. "That's us today," she says. The lock answers with a tired click. A door learning to be a door again. Inside the relay alcove, the air is cooler, carrying the metallic tang of ozone and archival dust. Racks blink with patient lights, cataloging the zoo's breath, its tickets and tides. Mara threads into a diagnostic shell and peels back menus until language drops out of politeness and becomes columns. Species, incidents, insurance liabilities. Humans glow in a red band with annotations that read like scripture written by litigators. Jonas leans over her shoulder, mouth tightening as he skims a video thumbnail labeled "First Contact, Amphor Rift," then another stamped closed. Not exhibit fault. Mr. Cole says softly that danger can be a museum label or a mirror. Amaya points to a maintenance loop that routes around the amphitheater during cleaning and asks if the loop could be widened to include their glass. "Maybe," Mara says, "if the zoo believes we are dirt again." She spoofs the loop, her fingers moving with shipyard certainty. Threx claws click once on metal behind them, a sound like a prayer deciding whether to be heard. "Plaques revise after incidents," he murmurs. "So let this be a non-incident." Mara answers and sends the command. The command takes like a seed in loam, quiet, then everywhere. And the station's habits shift by a hair's breadth the way a body adjusts to sleep. In the human habitat, a pump pauses mid-cycle, and the pond stills. In the concourse, a tram's route elongates until its watcher eye no longer sweeps the exhibit's southern pane. Mara feels the change as a slight easing in the floor. "Window," Jonas says, and they move with the hush of a ritual, threading back through the spine toward a hatch that should now think it's closed. Amaya squeezes Threx's hand without looking, the way children forgive before adults decide if they can. Mr. Cole takes the role of lookout, his silhouette squared by the viewport's starlight. The hatch blinks amber, considers their presence, then opens on a breath of borrowed dark. A new corridor yawns, lined with plaques awaiting text. A future museum of what comes next. "No incidents," Mara repeats, and steps through like the word could be a shield. Threx exhales, a sound almost human, and lets the door finish opening. The corridor of blank plaques feels like a future that forgot to name itself, each frame a shallow cradle for a story not yet told. And their footsteps sound indecently loud in the hush. Mara keeps count of cameras disguised as umber freckles in the ceiling. Every third one is dark. Every seventh pretends to blink but doesn't record, and she files the pattern where fear can't smudge it. Jonas tests a side door and finds a viewing slit onto the predator wing, where a glass forest holds something scaled and sleeping. He shuts it gently, as if noise alone could rewrite fate. Threx walks as if balancing a bowl of night, saying there is a freight transfer 2 decks down that empties refusal from the kitchens into a recycler. Refusal being their word for uneaten food, and Mara smiles at the grammar of waste. Amaya asks whether plaques can stay blank and still be true, and Mr. Cole answers that some museums are built to hold questions. The floor thrums with a tram changing mind, their borrowed quiet ticking toward its end. They reach a node where the corridors fork, one signed with a glyph for nourishment, another with the spiral sigil that marks archives and apology. Threx gestures toward the spiral, murmuring that records have more doors than halls, and Mara nods because paper, however the aliens name it, has always been a way out. Inside, the archive breathes cold. Shelves rise like organ pipes, and a console sleeps beneath a skin of dust repelled by policy. Mara wakes it, and the interface unfurls taxonomies with priestly certainty. Threat gradings, incident synopses, learning objectives for visiting young. Humans sit in the red column again, an essay of fear written by committees with clean hands. Jonas says softly that they've been curated into a mood board for caution. Mr. Cole replies that caution is a saint no one admits to worshipping. Amaya points to a footnote about mirror tests and asks whether the zoo ever wondered what its reflection thought. Threx does not speak, but his claws rest on the desk as if in confession. Mara edits one field. Visibility during transfer, reclassified to opaque. The archive door sighs open onto a concourse. No tourist should see. A behind-the-eyes lane where vendors replenish illusions and docents rehearse certainty. A pair of junior keepers rounds the bend, their harnesses bright with training chevrons. They halt at the sight of humans in the unpainted light. Language collides in the air. The translator fumbles. Threx steps forward, before protocol can, voice bare of ceremony, stating a non-sapient transfer in progress, authorized opacity per cycle variance. The juniors glance at the ceiling for permission and find only their own reflections. Mara does not slow. She touches Amaya's shoulder and turns their bodies into moving paperwork. Jonas carries the vent cover like a crate, letting Wade explain what words might betray. Mr. Cole meets one junior's eyes and offers the smallest nod, the kind old men use to close arguments. The moment teeters. Then the juniors step aside, relief settling over their faces like assigned homework completed. After, Threx's breath rasps once, the sound of a bridge learning it can hold. Stairs pour them into the nourishment level where smell becomes architecture. Warm starch, mineral brine, sour sweet fruit from worlds that never learned winter. Conveyor belts glide trays toward mall-like recyclers, labeled with a sigil that could mean refuse or repentance. Threx points to a shuttered loading bay, where containers marked opaque wait, like closed questions. Mara kneels at the manifest rail. The route scribbles a path from kitchens to waste barge, to orbital tender, with no stops for wonder. It won't look for us if we look like leftovers, she says. And Jonas grimaces but nods because camouflage is an old human sacrament. Amaya climbs into a container and settles among sealed nutrient packs, whispering that it smells like a grocery store memory. Mr. Cole checks his breath and folds himself beside her, a gentleman in a lifeboat refusing panic. Footsteps pass beyond the shutter, boots with nowhere urgent to be, and Threx keys the bay to manual, eyes closing as if saying grace. The shutter rolls up as slow as a sunrise under clouds. Metal closes over them with a softness that feels like betrayal, the container's insulation turning the world into breath and heartbeat, and the slow percussion of distant machinery. Mara lies curled by the latch, counting vibrations to map distance. 3 long rumbles, bulk doors, a lateral sway. Magnetic lock switching rails, a gentle jolt, barge coupling. Jonas whispers numbers back to her. A call and response of survival. Amaya's fingers find Mr. Cole's, and he tells her, in a murmur shaped like a bedtime tide, that ships listen if you promise not to lie to them. Outside, a chime declares the load sealed. Inside, Threx's absence becomes a presence, a space their hope occupies. The container tilts. Gravity reconsiders. They are moving. Somewhere alarms test their voices and decline to sing. Mara slides a pry tool beneath the latch and feels it consider a future where it lets go. No incidents. She breathes into the foam dark, not as prayer but as instruction to the universe, and the container answers with the smallest click a door has ever made. The container's small click becomes a road. The dark can follow. And Mara eases the latch until cold utility light paints a seam across their faces like a quiet verdict. The barge hums with a lower note than the zoo, a workman's drone without pretense, and Jonas says it feels honest in the bones. She answers that honesty is only useful if it opens a door. They listen. Fans, rails, the measured percussion of automated clamps, and Mara times her breath to the rhythm that signals loading complete. Transfer arm. If they wait too long, the recycler will claim them with the rest of refusal. If they move too soon, the corridor will be full of bored diligence. Mr. Cole whispers that boredom is the most dangerous patrol, and Amaya squeezes his hand before slipping toward the seam with the grace of someone who has practiced being small. The lid rises a fraction. The smell of brine and antiseptic starch rolls in, then metal feet clatter past, uninterested. Go, Mara says. Voice a ribbon under the engines, and they slide into the barge under light like a rumor, choosing its first listener. The service corridor beyond wears its purpose plainly. Graded floor, safety stripes scrubbed by years of wet wheels, a wall of hazard glyphs that promise consequences with bureaucratic intimacy. Mara keeps them tight to the shadow of a coolant pipe, counting the intervals of a patrolling drone they can hear, but not yet see. Jonas notes the shift in vibration underfoot, mag carts banking into a curve, and says the junction ahead will open onto a lift that feeds the tender. 2 options. Mara murmurs as if discussing recipes. Ride the lift as ghosts or climb the spine and gamble for vacuum. Mr. Cole votes for stairs in any language. Amaya glances up and grins at the thought of stars. The drone rounds the bend, lens eyes tasting air. Mara turns their bodies into cargo, stillness practiced since glass. The drone sniffs the opaque stamps and hums a satisfied note, drifting on. Ghosts it is, she decides, and they step onto the lift as the barge exhales a weary clank. A machine almost relieved to be full. The lift shudders to a halt at a checkpoint that tries to look like a lobby. Plants made of welded foil. A mural of the tender painted smiling. And 2 inspectors lean over a console in a long conversation with their own authority. Language peels and recombines around them as the translator digs for hospitality in a rulebook. Mara signals a staggered walk, the way workers move when their minds are already on lunch. And Jonas swings the vent cover like a crate whose mass discourages questions. One inspector looks up, blinks at opaque stamps, then at the lift manifest scrolling compliant numbers. The other taps a stylus that wants to doubt but prefers an easy afternoon. Mr. Cole coughs once. The sound, gentle as an apology, and something in the room relaxes. Keep the faces soft, Mara breathes. And they pass through the arch where a detector tastes them and finds only curated silence. The mural's painted ship smiles wider, as if flattered by their belief. They trade the lobby's pretense for the tender spine, a narrow catwalk hung in a volume of machinery, where wind becomes a suggestion and gravity reminds you it's rented by the hour. Through an open maintenance port, space stares in with uncomplicated hunger, and Mara tests a tether of repurposed container webbing, clipping each of them in sequence until the line hums with their shared weight. We could wait for the corridor, Jonas warns, but the corridor widens toward a knot of cameras, and the knot has begun to wake. Amaya watches a flurry of frost crystals drift past the opening like the first snow at a school window, and whispers that stars look quieter without a ceiling. Mr. E. Cole checks the buckle twice and nods to no one, a sailor greeting the old math. Short cross, Mara says, and they step into the open night where the station's skin curves like a held breath. Boots kissing steel with magnetic certainty, hearts inventing a rhythm to match the void. The tender's service hatch receives them with a breath of air that tastes of solvent and citrus. The kind of cleanliness that means departures happen here. Inside, the bay is quiet, except for the soft argument of 2 automated loaders debating priority. Panels blink a countdown that belongs to a scheduled burn. Their window narrows by digits that refuse metaphor. Mara spoofs a badge she doesn't own, and the hatch into the cargo spine unseals with the resigned grace of a rule, making an exception. Jonas asks the question he's avoided. What then, after the tender? And she answers that ships lead to docks, and docks to choices, which is all any animal needs to stop being curated. Amaya leans into the hatch seam, listening for voices of any kind, and Mr. Cole tilts his head as if catching a station's heartbeat through the rails. A footstep approaches. Unhurried, the cadence of someone who belongs. The door slides, light floods. Their borrowed shadow, and a voice, accented like earth remembered, says, startled and not displeased. You're late. The voice belongs to a man who moves like he's been waiting long enough to grow a philosophy around patience. And when he adds Samir, Doc 3, it lands like a password that forgot it was one. Mara takes in the jumpsuit's oil constellations, the grease scar under his thumb, the way his eyes catalog exits before faces, and files all of it under the heading of ally shaped like risk. Jonas' shoulders loosen a notch that only people who know him could see, while Amaya breathes, another human with the reverence of a museum child who finds a living exhibit behind the wall. Mr. Cole thanks the air for becoming a place where breath doesn't cost applause. Samir ushers them down the cargo spine, his voice low and efficient. There's a tender burn in 9 minutes, a customs sweep in 12, a maintenance lull. In between that is worth exactly one open door, if someone can teach the door to forget its job. We're good at teaching doors, Mara says, and the way Samir smiles is proof. Some myths travel faster than trams. Samir talks as he walks, stitching a history from ration lines and rumor. The zoo contracts out waste and tendering to companies who prefer plausible deniability. Workers are vetted for docility rather than curiosity. Sometimes the vetting fails. He nods to a sealed viewport where the station's hull curves like a shoulder, saying he saw Earth once as a smear through methane storms and decided that any map with home on it is worth stealing. Mara asks how many there are. He says enough to be a rumor, too few to be a crowd. Jonas asks if the keepers know. Samir says keepers are like weather. Some will shelter you. Some will drown you by following the rules. Amaya beams when he calls her kiddo, and Mr. Cole asks if Samir ever misses museums. All the time. Samir replies, that's why we break them a little. They stop at a bulkhead where a custom seal glows like an obedient halo. Door, Samir says. Meet teacher. Mara flexes her fingers as if greeting an old student. The seal wants credentials and ceremony. Mara offers silence and rhythm. She taps a pattern that mimics a maintenance heartbeat, inserts a delay where machines expect apology, then introduces a lie gentle enough to pass as truth. The door is already open somewhere else, so here it must be closed. Systems hate contradictions. They resolve them with deference. The halo cools from authority to acquiescence, and the bulkhead sighs. On the far side, a narrow gallery posted with transport schedules flows like a river of numbers toward a dock labeled in a script that pretends it has no past. Samir explains the plan with a mechanic's poetry. There's a courier tug whose captain thinks regulations are just stories ships tell each other. If they board during the lull, the sweep will count the tug as absence. Jonas checks the gallery's sightlines and nods once. Amaya asks if the tug has a window. 2. Samir promises. Mr. Cole listens and decides this sounds enough like a hymn. They move, carrying their rumor with them. The courier tug hunkers like a useful secret at the end of Dock Vesper 3. Its hull a patchwork of repairs so honest it borders on charm. A figure in a faded flight coat leans in the airlock. A cigarette that isn't burning, practicing the shape of ritual in her fingers. Captain Lele, Samir says. And introductions are a brisk choreography. names, purposes, the agreement that truth and discretion are cousins. Lala's eyes are old in the way pilots get when they've traded sleep for clear skies too often. She asks if this is a rescue or a theft. Whichever offends the fewest gods, Mara answers. The ship rumbles as if amused. Jonas passes the vent cover into a locker like an offering to ballast. Amaya peeks at the cockpit and gasps at star maps tattooed with grease pencil constellations of scrounged roots. Mr. Cole stands straighter as the tug breathes. He looks lighter, as if gravity has agreed to meet him halfway. "Strap in," Lala says. "Your lull is a tightrope, and I don't like falling." They lift on a breath that feels stolen and therefore perfect. The tug slipping its moorings with a cat's indifference. Engines whispering queries the station decides not to answer. The customs sweep begins 2 docks over with ceremonial thoroughness. Lale threads the lull like embroidery, stitching their absence into the tender's narrative. Samir stands by the hatch like someone guarding a story, while Jonas counts seconds under his breath until the numbers turn into relief. Amaya presses her face to one of the promised windows and whispers names for stars. No one has given her. Mr. Cole, harness snug, closes his eyes and listens for the shout that doesn't come. Mara watches the zoo recede through the second window, a halo of commerce and caution, and feels the word exhibit slide off her like old lacquer. "Where to?" Lala asks when the burn settles into a steady hymn. "Anywhere with a dock and a bakery," Mara says. And everyone laughs a little too hard, because sugar is another name for salvation. The tug purrs, pleased to agree. The tug's hum settles into a low animal purr, a tone that says the ship would rather be left alone to keep its promises, and Lala hangles her jaw toward a scatter of telemetry that refuses to be innocent. A faint ping echoes through the console like a memory rehearsing itself. Mara leans in and names it as a passive sweep on the zoo's public band, the kind of search that pretends it's not looking. Jonas tightens straps and asks whether they hide in the tender's wake or knife through the debris lane toward the gas giant's blue-lit limb. Lolhe answers with a pilot's superstition that debris prefers the honest. Samir marks a path through a graveyard of spent boosters and dead signage, while Mr. Cole murmurs that museums always send someone after stolen pieces of themselves. Amaya taps the porthole and wonders if bakeries ever orbit ring ice. Mara promises that, if not, they will invent one. The ping thickens to a whisper of pursuit, then thins as the tug dips into shadow, metal and math conspiring to let them pass like a rumor that lost the appetite to be caught. They slide into the graveyard orbit where failed ambitions drift like prayer wheels, and the tug dims exterior lights until it becomes more suggestion than ship. Lale threads them between a billboard skeleton and the ribbed fuselage of a booster that once promised prosperity in 5 languages. Mara spoofs a maintenance beacon so gentle it seems apologetic. Jonas teases apart a mesh of loose cables, anchoring them for camouflage, and remarks that hiding feels like an old family skill. Samir cracks a grin without joy and tunes the transponder to broadcast a slow distress from nowhere in particular. A ghost the sweep might choose to chase. Mr. Cole studies bolts, stamped with manufacturers extinct longer than their captivity, and says era is another kind of leash. Amaya asks what kind of dangerous animal hides. Mara answers that the dangerous ones learn patience because running is a statement, but waiting is a thesis. The sweep's whisper fades into a distant weather of signals, and the graveyard, generous in its silence, decides not to remember them. When they move again, it is like stepping barefoot across a room where someone sleeps. The tug whispers through ring ice shadow and emerges into the ragged halo of a free port, carved into an old mining spindle. Kestrel's market shimmers with patched pressure domes and singage that looks handmade because honesty sells better here than polish. Lale calls in a docking request with a voice that suggests she was expected. The reply bargains in favors rather than fees. Mara clocks the cameras in the blind corners designed to let trouble pass without meeting itself. Jonas shoulders a maintenance crate because carrying weight reads as belonging. Samir warns that the market loves stories, and will try to turn them into one unless they choose their own narrator. Mr. Cole smiles at the sound of cooking oil and laughter traveling through steel like church bells. Amaya beams at a window strung with paper moons that someone insists are the real shape of luck. The tug docks with a kiss of magnets, and the Freeport opens its throat to swallow and protect them in the same gesture. The bakery is a carved-out nook near a recycler that sighs like an old dog, and the bread tastes of yeast made from the market's air. The flavor of a place deciding to keep you. Mara eats slowly, as if cataloging proof of world-building, while Lale negotiates with a document forger, whose ethics are laminated and thumb-worn. Jonas watches the flow of uniforms and relaxed criminals, noting how authority here is a dance rather than a march. Samir pays for 3 identities and a repair part with the casual gravity of someone spending courage. Mr. Cole tears a heel of bread and says quietly that freedom is not a door, but a habit of hands. Amaya brings sugar to her lips and declares it the opposite of glass. A news splice flickers on a wall. An official statement about an incident log updated. No injuries. Protocol affirmed. Mara feels the words pick at her skin, like burrs, and decides a story told without them will still be true. The forger stamps fresh names onto old ghosts and pushes them across the table with a grin that promises trouble and survival in equal measure. They are halfway back to the tug when the market's loudspeakers cough and sing a chime that means messages. A private channel winks on Lale's wrist with a signature that is not supposed to exist this far from the zoo. Threk's voice arrives thinner, filtered through 1,000 polite systems, and asks whether the word incident still fits in their mouths. Mara answers without speaking because the question is a mirror. She feels the tug tilt in her bones toward choices. Threk says protocols have learned their lesson poorly, that plaques change slower than people, and that a maintenance cycle will open a corridor in 2 nights that ends in cages, mislabeled classrooms. Jonas swears softly and says, "Rescue is a ship with too few seats." Samir calculates fuel like a gambler reading a face. Lila mutters that this market sells luck but not time. Mr. Cole closes his eyes, counting breaths that used to steady children at museums. Amaya tucks the sugar packet into her pocket like a relic and says, bright and unafraid, that dangerous species travel in packs. The decision lands between them like gravity. Returning, the plan is a braid of favors and timing, thin as fishing line, and Layla lays it on the console like a map she does not admire. The tug pretends to be a contracted courier returning recyclable solvent. Samir spoofs a manifest with the forger's laminated ethics. Threx threads a maintenance variance through the zoo's spine that opens onto the classrooms, just long enough to be called a glitch. We'll get 3, maybe 4, Samir warns, and Jonas says numbers matter until faces arrive. Then they become liars. Mr. Cole straightens the forged lanyard with the grave ceremony of someone putting on a borrowed name. Amaya asks if they're saving only humans, and Mara answers that rescues are fractal. You start where you're standing, and the shape repeats. Lale flicks the unlit cigarette and says a lull this tight will bite, then nods anyway because sometimes piloting is choosing who gets to keep a sky. The tug yawns from its moorings. Kestrel's market dwindles. Mara feels the old glass humming in her bones and decides not to be an exhibit twice. They dock to the zoo's service ring with the deference of thieves visiting a church they once escaped, and protocol greets them with the weary politeness of bureaucracy doing its best. Threx variance arrives as a quiet green in a sea of amber, and a gate that should ask questions decides to remember an answer already given. Mara walks like a worker who has memorized the floor's arguments. Jonas shoulders a crate that is mostly an alibi. Samir handles the chatter with the bland confidence of a man who has learned to be invisible in crowds. Mr. Cole becomes air, smiling at no one and everything, while Amaya keeps close enough to be a shadow. A junior keeper blinks at their opaque stamps and then at Threx materializing beside them with a nod that translates as, "I'm responsible." "Classrooms," Mara says softly, as if practicing an honest word for a dishonest room. The lift grumbles. The variance ticks. 3, maybe 4, Samir repeats. But Mara hears a door asking to be unlearned and thinks, as many as fit inside a choice. The classrooms smell like antiseptic and chalk drawn by machines. Desks line up like obedient teeth, and cages masquerade as study carrels with gentle restraints tucked under the lip. 3 humans and 1 child of a crested species look up when the door sighs. Shock crosses them in slow, careful steps, as if the room punishes sudden joy. Mara speaks before fear can organize, her voice a practiced hush. "Field trip, wrong room, follow our boredom." Jonas cracks the restraint locks with the same tenderness he reserves for tools that have forgotten their names. Cole kneels to meet a trembling gaze and invents a story about a museum that lets exhibits choose their own captions. Amaya slips a hand to the crested child and says that dangerous species travel in packs. The child's crest flutters like a small dawn. Threx stands in the doorway, carrying the weight of legitimacy and guilt, and counts with his eyes the cameras he has already taught to blink elsewhere. 2 minutes, Samir says, reading the variance like a timer on a burning fuse. "Enough," Mara answers, and the room agrees. The variance begins to fray like a song, losing tempo, alarms testing their vowels in distant rooms, and moving becomes the only grammar that matters. They spill into the corridor in a formation that reads as logistics. Mara in front with a clipboard made of nerve, Jonas bracketed around the smallest, Samir shepherding stragglers with a manifest that lies beautifully. Cole walks beside the oldest of the rescued, telling her about bread as if it were a spell. Amaya points at the floor stripes and turns them into a game of stepping only on safe colors. Threx peels away at a junction, leaving a key in the shape of a glance that says he cannot cross one more line without breaking into shards he won't recognize. A guard rounds the corner with surprise still soft on his face. Jonas meets it with a dropped crate that explodes into paperwork and noise. "Incidental spill," Mara says, voice pure procedure, and the guard recoils from the bureaucracy more than the people. The lift doors open like forgiveness learned on a deadline. "Home," Lali says over comms, and the word snaps them taut. They make the tug with the market's luck still clinging to them like sugar dust, and Layla punches a burn that tucks them under a freighter's shadow until jurisdiction becomes a rumor no one wants to chase. The rescued breathe in the cockpit's cramped holiness as if air could be new, if you promise to deserve it. The crested child presses its crest to the porthole and names stars in a language that sounds like rain on tin. Samir counts heads twice and then once more, a ritual against absence. Mr. Cole presses warm bread into shaking hands because some sacraments arrive on time. Jonas looks back only once and sees nothing he owes. Mara watches the zoo recede into a punctuation mark and feels the word dangerous untie itself from their names. It drifts outward, looking for a better sentence. The comm pings. A single note from Threx. No words, just proof of distance bridged. "Where now?" Lela asks, softer this time. "A place with bakeries and blank plaques," Mara says. And Amaya adds, "and classrooms where doors open from the inside." The tug agrees, and the stars make room.